You've finally done it. After years of bending, breaking, and bleeding for everyone else, you said no. And suddenly, the people you loved most are calling you selfish. Your family feels like strangers. Friends who used to text you every day have vanished. The ones who depended on you, they look at you like you've betrayed them. Here's what no one tells you. You're not losing relationships. You're discovering which ones were built on your silence, your sacrifice, your slow disappearance. And if that realization is tearing you apart right now, if you're wondering whether setting boundaries was a mistake, then everything you're about to hear will change the way you see this pain forever. Carl Jung discovered something profound when he treated empaths who finally chose themselves. It doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like abandonment, like punishment, like you've become the villain in someone else's story. But what's actually happening? You're finally choosing peace. And peace, for someone who's been at war with themselves for years, looks a lot like loneliness before it looks like liberation. Jung identified 3 specific phases every empath goes through during this transformation. And here's the truth. The temporary isolation you're experiencing right now, it's not the end of connection. It's the pathway to the healthiest, most genuine relationships you've ever known. But only if you understand the razor-thin difference between necessary boundaries and destructive isolation. Let me show you what Jung saw and why the people leaving your life right now were never truly in it to begin with. In 1923, Jung began treating a woman we'll call Elizabeth. She was what we'd now recognize as a highly sensitive empath, someone who absorbed everyone's emotions like a sponge, solved everyone's problems like it was her job, stayed available 24/7, like her worth depended on it. And then, her body gave out. Chronic fatigue so crushing she couldn't leave her bed, migraines that lasted for days, panic attacks that came out of nowhere, like her nervous system was screaming what her voice never could. Her doctor found nothing physically wrong, so he sent her to Jung. And Jung knew immediately what was happening. Elizabeth's psyche was staging a full-blown rebellion against years of self-abandonment disguised as compassion. He asked her one simple question. When was the last time you said no to someone? She couldn't remember. So, Jung gave her an assignment. Just one. Say no to one request that week. That's it. Elizabeth chose her sister, the one who called every single night to vent about her marriage for hours. Elizabeth finally said it. I love you, but I can't talk tonight. I need rest. Her sister's response? You've changed. You used to care about me. What's wrong with you? Within a week, Elizabeth's mother called, saying the family was worried about her. Her friends stopped inviting her places. Her husband asked if she was having a breakdown. Elizabeth came back to Jung, devastated. I set one boundary, and I'm losing everyone. Jung told her something that would change her life forever. You're not losing everyone. You're discovering that most of your relationships were based on an unconscious agreement. You abandon yourself, they get their needs met. When you broke that agreement by choosing yourself, they experienced it as betrayal. You haven't changed into someone selfish. You've stopped being someone self-abandoning. And the people who benefited from your self-abandonment, they will experience this as loss. This is what I call the boundary crisis, the moment when healthy differentiation feels like total relationship collapse. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger's research at UCLA shows that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. When multiple people pull away simultaneously after you set boundaries, your brain experiences it as a genuine threat to survival. But here's what you need to understand. What feels like losing everyone is actually a sorting process. And knowing which of the 3 phases you're in will determine whether you end up isolated or genuinely connected for the first time in your life. If you've set your first boundaries and now feel like everyone is abandoning you, drop a comment. I'm discovering who is real. Because what feels like losing everyone is actually revealing who can meet you whole versus who needed you fragmented. When you set your first real boundary, something happens instantly. The exposure. You suddenly see which relationships were conditional, Within days of Elizabeth's first no, the pattern became crystal clear. Her sister escalated, calling more frequently, showing up unannounced, recruiting family members to convince Elizabeth she was being difficult. Her mother weaponized guilt. After everything I've done for you, you can't even take a call? Her husband became passive-aggressive, sighing heavily, making comments about how she used to be more easygoing. This is the exposure. Boundary setting reveals the invisible contracts that governed your relationships. These contracts were never spoken out loud, but they were absolutely binding. I will be endlessly available, and you will give me belonging. I will manage your emotions, and you will need me. I will never challenge you, and you will call it love. Dr. Harriet Lerner's research on relationship systems confirms this. In codependent systems, one person's differentiation triggers anxiety in everyone else because it threatens the equilibrium. Their reaction isn't about you becoming worse. It's about them losing access to what you were providing, your endless availability, your emotional labor, your self-abandonment. They're not rejecting the real you. They're mourning the loss of the role you played. Florence Nightingale experienced this exact pattern after returning from the Crimean War. She discovered her own strength and voice during the war. But when she came back to England, her family immediately tried to reinstate her old role as beautiful, obedient daughter. Her mother became mysteriously ill and required constant attention. Her sister developed vague ailments. Her father expressed disappointment that Florence was neglecting family duties. Nightingale's letters revealed the truth. Every time I establish independence, my family creates a crisis that demands I return to servitude. It is as though they cannot tolerate my separate existence. This is the testing. People who benefited from your boundarylessness will unconsciously create situations designed to pull you back. Elizabeth experienced every common testing tactic. Escalation. Her sister moved from nightly calls to showing up at her door. If you won't talk on the phone, I'll just come over. Recruitment. Her mother organized a family intervention where everyone expressed concern about Elizabeth's changes. Crisis creation. Her husband scheduled important events during Elizabeth's alone time, then acted hurt when she maintained her boundary.
Guilt manipulation. Remember when I helped you through your depression and now you can't even answer my calls? Withdrawal threats. If you're going to be this way, maybe we shouldn't talk at all. Here's the critical juncture. Can you maintain your boundary while remaining compassionate? Jung taught Elizabeth a crucial distinction. You can care about their feelings without making their feelings your responsibility. You can have empathy without rescuing them from the consequences of their behavior. But testing requires you to tolerate other people's discomfort, and that's where most people fail. The testing feels so unbearable, the guilt, the pressure, the fear of loss, that they abandon their boundaries to restore peace. But that peace? It's actually a return to self-abandonment. If you maintain your boundaries through the testing, you enter the third phase. Elizabeth's 3 closest relationships demonstrated all 3 possible outcomes. Her husband, the transformer. For 3 months, he remained passive-aggressive, punishing her with silence and sighs. Then one night, he broke down. Why am I so angry that you're taking care of yourself? That question led him to therapy, where he discovered his own abandonment wounds. He'd unconsciously needed Elizabeth depleted because it made him feel less guilty about his own emotional unavailability. When she became whole, he had to face his own emptiness. Their marriage transformed into genuine partnership, where both people maintained boundaries and authenticity. Her mother, the acceptor. She never fully understood why Elizabeth changed. She'd still comment at family dinners, "You used to be so easygoing, now you're so particular." But eventually, she adapted. She learned that late-night calls wouldn't be answered, that visits required advanced planning, that Elizabeth would leave gatherings when she reached capacity. They maintained connection, just not enmeshment. The relationship lost intensity, but gained honesty. Her sister, the exit. She couldn't tolerate Elizabeth's boundaries. Every no was experienced as rejection. She tried everything: guilt, rage, going silent for weeks, then returning with demands. After 6 months, she sent a final message. "You're not the sister I knew. I don't know who you are anymore." They haven't spoken in years. Elizabeth eventually realized the relationship had always been one-directional. Her sister needed endless emotional support, but never reciprocated. The sorting isn't failure, it's clarity. You're not losing everyone. You're discovering who can meet you as a whole person versus who needed you fragmented. Research on highly sensitive people confirms this pattern. Those who set boundaries lose approximately half their relationships initially, but they report significantly higher quality in the remaining connections. One reciprocal friendship becomes more nourishing than 10 extractive ones. If you're in the sorting phase and some relationships are ending while others are deepening, comment, "The right ones are staying." But here's where many people make a fatal mistake. Many people who successfully set boundaries fall into a dangerous trap. They confuse necessary differentiation with destructive isolation. Jung treated a man in 1928, we'll call him Heinrich, who'd successfully set boundaries with his toxic family. His story reveals the trap. Heinrich came to Jung initially for the same reason as Elizabeth: exhaustion from over-functioning in his family. His parents were alcoholics, his siblings were constantly in crisis, and Heinrich had been the family fixer since childhood. Jung helped him establish boundaries. Heinrich stopped lending money. He stopped answering crisis calls. He moved to a different city. But then, Heinrich took it too far. When Jung saw him a year later, Heinrich had cut off not just toxic people, but everyone. He'd quit his job because his boss didn't understand him. He'd ended a romantic relationship because his partner made emotional demands. He'd stopped attending his church because people there were unconscious. Heinrich sat in Jung's office, completely alone, and said, "I'm finally at peace. I've removed all the toxic people from my life." Jung asked, "And who remains?" Heinrich looked confused. "Myself. That's all I need. I'm too evolved for ordinary relationships." This is the isolation trap, using spiritual language to justify complete withdrawal driven by fear, not consciousness. Jung spent months helping Heinrich see the difference. At first, Heinrich had been setting healthy boundaries with genuinely toxic people, but then fear took over. Heinrich began interpreting every relationship difficulty as others' unconsciousness, rather than examining his own behavior. Every conflict became evidence that he was too evolved, rather than an opportunity for growth. The critical distinctions. Heinrich at 6 months, healthy differentiation. I need distance from my alcoholic parents to heal. I'm maintaining friendships with people who respect boundaries. I'm lonely sometimes, but I'm building toward healthier connections. Heinrich at 1 year, destructive isolation. Everyone is unconscious. I'm better off alone. People who can't handle my truth don't deserve access to me. Solitude is spiritual superiority. His mental health told the story. During healthy boundary setting, his depression lifted, energy returned, creativity flourished. During isolation, depression came back worse than before, anxiety increased. He experienced paranoid thoughts that people were talking about him, plotting against him. Jung wrote, "Individuation does not isolate. It connects but on new terms, conscious terms, where both people maintain their wholeness." Research supports this. Healthy boundary setting correlates with increased social connection quality. But isolation, even when rationalized as self-care, correlates with declining mental and physical health. The warning signs you've crossed from differentiation into isolation. Pattern 1. Total relationship loss. You've lost all relationships, not just toxic ones. You interpret every conflict as others being unconscious. You feel superior to people who maintain relationships. You've stopped seeking new connections. Pattern 2. Declining mental health. Your mental health is getting worse, not better. Depression, anxiety, or paranoia increasing. You're using spiritual language to justify withdrawal. You refuse to examine your own behavior in conflicts. If you notice these patterns, it's time to seek professional support. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Jung himself underwent analysis multiple times throughout his life because he understood that no one can see their own blind spots alone. The goal isn't to become a hermit who's too conscious for relationships. The goal is to become whole enough that you can have genuine relationships where both people maintain their boundaries and their authenticity. You didn't survive toxic relationships just to spend the rest of your life alone. You survived them so you could finally experience what real connection feels like. 6 months after Elizabeth began setting boundaries, something unexpected happened. She met someone at a support group who immediately felt different. This woman, we'll call her Marie, asked Elizabeth about herself and actually listened. When Marie shared her own struggles, she didn't make them Elizabeth's responsibility. They agreed to meet for coffee. At coffee, Marie said, "I can only stay an hour. I have a therapy appointment." Elizabeth felt relief, not rejection. An hour felt perfect. When Elizabeth talked about her boundary-setting journey, Marie didn't say, "You should forgive your sister." She said, "That sounds really hard. How are you taking care of yourself?" When Elizabeth offered to help Marie with a project, Marie said, "That's kind, but I've got it. Maybe we could work on our own projects together sometime?" After they said goodbye, Elizabeth sat in her car, crying. Not from pain, from recognition. She told Jung, "I've never experienced this before, friendship without exhaustion." Jung smiled. "This is what relationship looks like when both people are whole. You couldn't have attracted this before because you weren't available for it. You were too busy being consumed by those who needed you fragmented." What made Elizabeth and Marie's friendship different? They both maintained wholeness. Marie had done her own therapy work. She didn't need Elizabeth to complete her or fix her. Neither used the relationship to avoid their own inner work. They enhanced each other's lives, but weren't essential to each other's basic functioning. They communicated clearly. Marie could say, "I can only stay an hour without apology." Elizabeth could say, "I'm not up for plans this week," without guilt. Disappointment was okay. Neither expected the other to be endlessly available. Support flowed both directions. When Elizabeth's mother was in the hospital, Marie brought food and sat with her. When Marie struggled with work stress, Elizabeth listened without trying to fix it. The relationship had balance, not perfect equality in every moment, but reciprocity over time. They respected each other's autonomy. Marie had other friends. Elizabeth had other interests. Neither felt threatened by the other's separate life. Your wholeness doesn't threaten me. My wholeness doesn't threaten you. This is what Jung meant by the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradoxes. You can be strong and need help. You can be independent and want connection. You can have boundaries and deep intimacy.
Elizabeth's practical technique for maintaining reciprocal relationships, the boundary audit. Monthly, she reviewed each relationship. Does this person respect my boundaries? Do I feel energized or depleted after our interactions? Is there reciprocity over time? If the answer was consistently negative, the relationship needed renegotiation or release. She also learned to actively seek what Jung called the conscious community, others who value healthy differentiation. She found them in a codependency recovery group where people practiced boundaries together, a Jungian study circle where psychological growth was the norm. Jung wrote, "You cannot maintain individuation in isolation. You need others who have also chosen the difficult path of becoming whole." The loneliness Elizabeth felt during the sorting phase was temporary. But the friendships she built after, with Marie and others who could meet her whole, became the foundation of a completely different life. Maya Angelou described this exact transformation after leaving her abusive marriage. She wrote, "I had to lose everyone who knew me as small before I could meet people who could see me whole." Her post-boundary life included deep friendships with James Baldwin, Malcolm X, and others who met her as a complete person, relationships impossible when she was still self-abandoning. If you're ready to build reciprocal relationships instead of staying isolated, comment, "I choose connection, not codependency." A year after beginning her boundary work, Elizabeth described her life to Jung. "I wake up without dread. I have coffee alone before my husband wakes, that's my time. I see Marie once a week. My mother visits monthly with advance notice. I say no without guilt when I need to. And I say yes with genuine enthusiasm when I want to. I'm alone often, but I'm not lonely. I'm connected, but I'm not consumed." Jung smiled. You've discovered what I spent my life trying to articulate. The goal of individuation is not to become separate, but to become separable. To know where you end and another begins, while choosing to bridge that gap consciously. This is the integration phase, where you can be fully yourself and deeply connected. Elizabeth's daily balance. Morning solitude for integration. Clear boundaries around her time and energy. Regular check-ins with herself. Is this decision honoring me? Saying no without guilt when needed. Genuine presence with people she cared about. Vulnerability within appropriate contexts. Helping when she genuinely wanted to, not from obligation. Seeking support when she needed it. The key, both divided by and, not either divided by or. Autonomy creates capacity for genuine connection. Connection reminds you why wholeness matters. But Elizabeth remained vigilant. For 2 warning signs, she might slip back. Warning sign number 1. Slipping backward. If no started feeling impossible again. If she began attracting people who needed excessive caretaking. If guilt about self-care returned. These signaled the old contract trying to reassert itself. Warning sign number 2. Overcorrecting. If every boundary became absolute. If she couldn't tolerate any requests. If flexibility felt like weakness. This meant she'd swung into defensive rigidity rather than conscious choice. True integration is firm, but flexible. Elizabeth's 3 maintenance practices. Monthly boundary review. Where am I maintaining boundaries well? Where am I slipping? Not to judge herself, but to stay conscious. Quarterly relationship evaluation. Is there reciprocity in each significant relationship? Do we respect each other's boundaries? Is connection nourishing or depleting? Make adjustments as needed. Ongoing support. Elizabeth stayed in therapy for 2 years after her initial crisis. Jung emphasized this wasn't failure, it was commitment to consciousness. He himself was in analysis throughout his life. Jung's final wisdom, Elizabeth's new mantra. I am complete within myself, and I choose connection with others. I can be alone without loneliness, and together without dissolution. I set boundaries without cruelty, and maintain them without guilt. I help others when I genuinely want to, and refuse when I genuinely can't. I am whole. Elizabeth's journey. Months 1 to 2, boundary crisis felt like losing everyone. Months 2 to 4, testing and sorting relationships, transforming or ending. Months 4 to 8, rebuilding with reciprocal relationships. Year 1 and beyond, integration and maintenance autonomous with connection. Your timeline may vary, but the pattern holds. Temporary disruption leads to permanent improvement. When healthy boundaries feel like losing everyone, here's what's actually happening. You're not losing everyone. You're discovering who can meet you whole. The pain is real, but it's labor pain. Something new is being born. The loneliness is temporary, but the relationships you're building are permanent because they're based on truth, not pretense. Some people couldn't handle you fragmented and compliant. They'll leave. Let them. The ones who can handle you whole and authentic, they're the ones worth keeping. And new ones who match your wholeness will arrive once you've made space for them. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and to discover that the right people were waiting to meet you there all along. Your boundary setting isn't destroying your capacity for connection. It's revealing your capacity for real connection, the kind you've never experienced because you've never been whole enough to create it. The relationships you lost weren't serving your growth. The temporary loneliness is teaching you discernment, and the connections you're building now, they're the ones you'll look back on and realize made everything worth it. You didn't survive toxic relationships just to remain alone. You survived them to finally discover what love looks like when both people are whole. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.